Oh, it's me. I'm supposed to be here. I'd like to welcome you to the First Unitarian Church of Cincinnati. My name is Karen Rohr, and I am today's worship associate. Our church is a place where you are free to be you. So bring your questioning mind, your expansive heart, your entire self to this beloved community. Our mission is to welcome all with love, to support learning and spiritual growth, to serve our wider community, and to work for justice, equity, and inclusion. Please make sure to read the announcements in today's order of service and the insert, where you can find important information regarding accommodations and upcoming events. The flowers today are given by Dick and Linda Meltner in memory of their son, Tim, who passed away too young 3 years ago. Before we begin our service, let's take a moment to wave to the people watching from home. Then rise and greet our neighbors or say hello in the chat. When you hear the singing bell ring, please return to your seats. Say hi. Okay. Where is it? Chloe, would you please come forward and light our chalice? A generous heart is always open, always ready to receive our going and coming in the midst of such love. We need never fear abandonment. This is the most precious gift true love offers. The experience of knowing we always belong. Our first hymn this morning is number 1011, Return Again, found in the Teal hymnal. We're going to do 2 verses. 2 rounds. Okay.
By the step. Will you take a seat? Awesome. Will you take a seat? So I have a game here. This game is called Jenga. Have you ever played it?
I have.
You've played Jenga?
I have.
And you have? What is the goal of Jenga?
To keep it standing up as much as you can.
That's right, you have to keep it up standing as tall as you can for as long as you can.
I think I played Jenga.
And you think you've played Jenga before too?
I don't really know, but I think I have.
Okay. So, Jenga is a lot like a covenant in that everyone who shares in a covenant, just like everyone who plays the game of Jenga, their goal is to make sure that it doesn't break apart. It doesn't fall or fall down. Even if there is conflict, or even if something at the center
That's a very good idea.
even if something at the very center.
You need to try to get one out right over here, right up.
Yeah, you try to get one out in the tower and you put it on top. It's the same thing with covenants. Even if something at the center comes out, you still want to make sure it tries to stay upright.
Yeah.
And if there's someone new or they bring a new idea, you're still trying to make sure that it stays upright. It's everyone's goal when you play Jenga. And what happens, now tell me, what happens if something goes wrong and it falls? What do you do then? What do you do? You lose? That's true. And then what?
I put my tail under me when I think I'll fall.
You build it back up again. That is right. So even if you lose, even if the covenant gets broken, you just build it back up again. Just like that. Try to get as high as possible. So today I thought we would make a covenant for our VIP lounge. Now, one thing I didn't mention about covenants. It's important for you to know covenants are a list of promises we make to each other for how we are going to be together. So I wonder if there's a promise you want to make for when you use the VIP lounge. You have one, Lily? Promise to be nice. I like that one. What does nice mean, though? So you help people when you're in the VIP lounge. Okay, I like that. I hear ya. What else? Kindness. I wonder if some of the adults might want to add to the VIP lounge covenant. Quiet. Oh, what do you think about that? Now remember, a covenant is a list of promises we make to each other. So can we promise to be quiet when we're in the VIP lounge? What do you think about that? Lily? Raise your hand when you have a question, but you don't really have a question in the VIP lounge, do you? So I need your thoughts here, friends. Do you think it's possible? Can you promise to be quiet when you're in the VIP lounge? Or would that be really hard and maybe there's another promise you can make? Yes. Okay, well that sounds like a great joy, and we can talk about that when we're in class today. So I don't know about being quiet, because that might make it hard to share or to be helpful, but what about talking softly? What do you think about that? Talking softly when we're in the VIP lounge. Is that a promise you think you can make? I see some nods. What are some other ones? Yeah. Calm bodies. Oh, that's interesting. I know we have some dancers among us. So what do we think about calm bodies? Let's see. I don't want to stop anyone from dancing if they're really happy with dancing. What if, do you have an idea, Lily? Well, we're talking about bodies right now. Maybe we keep our bodies to ourselves? How does that sound? Or maybe we dance when there's music? I don't know.
Maybe we dance to ourselves.
Maybe we dance to ourselves? I think maybe this is a conversation we can keep on having as we think about what it means to be together in this space, okay? So we'll think about it, and maybe you, my friends, and I will talk about this more when we're in class today, and we'll bring it back another time, okay? All right, let's head on to class.
Today, we're going to give you an update on what's going on at South Avondale Elementary School with the tutoring program. And I want to start by introducing somebody who has become very dear to me over the years. I'm talking about Loretta Roberson. I first met her 11 years ago. We had already been tutoring for a couple of years, and she became the kindergarten teacher at South Avondale, and I was honored to work with her classroom. She left us for a year, which made me very sad. I didn't think she'd ever come back, but she did come back. She came back as the reading specialist, and I'd like her to come up now and talk about our tutoring program.
Good morning, everyone. It has been my honor to work with First Unitarian for over the past 10 years with the tutoring program. First Unitarian saw the need that was in Avondale. Many of our students come into kindergarten 2 to 3 years behind their grade level. And the work that First Unitarian has done has helped us tremendously. As early education moves from and center in the public policy debate, more attention is being paid for early literacy. Early literacy education professionals have long recognized the importance of language and literacy in preparing children to succeed in school. Early literacy plays a key role in enabling the kind of early learning experience that research shows are linked with academic achievement, reduced grade retention, higher education rates, and enhanced productivity in an adult life. So we pulled up some data. Our data showed that this is our school report card. Last year was the first time in over 10 years that we received 3 stars. So we received 3 out of 5 stars. So exciting. So this year we kept and maintained that 3 stars. So next year we are looking for bigger and greater. As you can see, our early literacy grade is still an area of need, and so that's why I'm coming to you today. In our next slide, we have our great, beautiful First Unitarian tutors. The impact that the tutoring program has on the students has been tremendous. Just knowing that one person is coming each week for them, the kids that love that comes with the tutoring, it's just not the academics that they're getting that consistency, that love, and they get to see that person, and they're wanting to see their person. So just that connection has moved our scores tremendously, as I'll show you on the next slide. Our I Love Books program. So First Unitarian saw the need that they wanted each student to have a home library. So what they did is that they took the funds that you guys have from your offering, purchased books for us. Each kid got to take home over 5 to 7 books. That was last year, the year before, probably 10 to 12 books. So each year, those kids are getting those libraries inside of their homes, and they're getting to take that time at home and practice their reading, and we have seen the great, great push. Next slide. So here goes. At the beginning of the school year last year, there were 20 out of 44 students that were off track. So that's almost half of the students that came in. By the end of the school year, with all you guys' great, great help, we got the kids we had 90.9% proficient in reading at the end of the school year. So that was a 45.9 increase in closing the gap. We thank you so much for that. So looking at our last slide, I just wanted to tell you about we know that just our time is so valuable. And we know that just having that person there each week to just practice with you, we're not going to leave you by yourself. And if you need some extra help and you want some assistance and it's something new to you, we won't leave you alone. I'm there. Miss Karen is also there training as well. But we just need bodies. We need your time, 1 day a week if you can, twice if you got extra time, but 1 day a week if you could. Please, you see the great impact that you guys are doing. We're pushing for 4 stars next year. Please help us be a part of getting that 4 stars. Thank you.
Okay. Well, Loretta kind of stole my thunder there about what I was going to say. First of all, would everybody who has in the past or recently tutored at South Avondale, will you please stand up? Thank you. We have made a difference. When the previous principal was there, he said that before COVID, we got to excellent, and he gave us a lot of credit for getting South Avondale Elementary to excellent, and we need to do it again. Most of you know that I'm pretty passionate about this program. I'm not sure you really understand why. Loretta touched on it, but the statistics show that if a kid can pass their 4th grade proficiency testing, 80% of them go on to graduate high school. Graduate high school, 80% of them stay out of jail. We're changing a child's life, but we're also changing the life in the community. We will tutor. The teachers asked us, before we changed the program, I met with the teachers, with Ms. Roberson and the kindergarten teachers, and they asked us to take 2 groups of children, one each for half a year, because they saw the tremendous gains that our kids had made, and other kids really needed it. So we'll be taking 24 kids out of the about 50 kids this year. We'll be taking half of them. I read this and I can't remember where, but we need to teach functional reading as well as just deciphering. Because of the huge push to phonics, which is important, and I'm not saying it's not, but I've been teaching for over 50 years now. When I graduated in 1970 with an teaching of English degree, yeah, smile at that, Dan, 50 years. Teaching of English degree, everything was phonics. Everything was phonics. Then I got my degree 25 years later in TESOL, teaching English to speakers of other languages. Of course, I needed to take another reading class. Everything was whole language development. Everything was sight words. We're not going to do phonics. It interferes with really reading. You need both. You see Loretta's nodding her head. We need both. Now, that doesn't mean we're not going to still support some of the phonics, but we're going to be supporting sight words. We're going to be I have a list here. Here are skills that they need to become truly functional readers, not just deciphering letters and words, but functional readers. Functional reading empowers individuals to navigate the world, make informed decisions, and lead independent lives. So some of the skills that are kind of missing: vocabulary acquisition. Our kids from poor backgrounds come in with only 800-word vocabulary. Kids who come from families that have high education come to kindergarten with 1,800-word vocabulary. That's a 1,000-word deficit. We're going to be looking at vocabulary acquisition, sight words, grouping, sequencing of events. But as we were meeting, one of our group, and I think it was Barbara, it might have been Amy, said the most important thing we need to do is to teach kids to love to read. So we're going to be really focusing on reading. We are short a few tutors. I need about 3, maybe 4 more tutors to get the program up and running. We always need substitutes. We all have lives. Please come to the table outside and see if you could give 1 hour a week, maybe 2, and also the subs. In addition, we have created a brand new program for next year, and I've spread it out in the Ellen Hall room. So please come and take a look at what we've worked so hard to do. Thank you. Our next hymn is 352, Find a Stillness, found in the gray hymnal. Please rise as you are willing and able.
Well, good morning, everybody. Good morning. So good to see you all this morning. I had a tough time waking up today. And during the Greet Your Neighbor, I found somebody else who had a tough time waking up today. My coffee just didn't do it. But you all are doing it for me. So I'm really glad I'm here, and I'm glad you all showed up. You're providing me the energy I need to preach. So strap up, I'm going to preach. Not so much. I'm going to preach. We'll say preaching for after Labor Day. Today I'm just going to preach. And so this is the third in... Am I cutting out again, Doug? Yeah, wow. What's that? Wow. One of those days. Just murmur among yourselves. You need a new hat? Oh, no, we'll swap it. Remember I said it was either the body pack or the channel? Yep. Starting to think it's the channel. That, all right? I'll go down in history. My preaching was so hot, I blew out the microphone on a weekly basis. I don't think that'll be my post-mortem reputation. All right, so as I was saying, this is the third sermon in our 3-part sermon series on Ahimsa, which means nonviolence, right? And Ahimsa dates back how far for those of you who were here the last week or two? 3,500 years prior to even the emergence of Hinduism on the Indian subcontinent. And it comes from the Jain tradition. And the Jains, as I explained in my first sermon, are the folks who most of their spiritual life revolved around not doing harm in any manner whatsoever. Not doing harm with our deeds, not doing harm with our words, and not even doing harm with our thoughts, which is what today's going to be about. But before I go there, I'm just curious, following on the heels of last week's sermon, where I talked about how much harm we do with our words, and left you with the thought of looking for opportunities to edify others with your words. Don't raise your hands, scoundrels. How many of you were actually intentional this week in your encounters with other people to use your words, these very powerful tools, to edify others? I'd like you to consider going forward, considering this as a spiritual practice. Try to remember when you encounter someone, especially someone who's struggling, what simple words can I speak to spin this person's moment in a positive direction and edify them? In other words, so that when you leave in an encounter with another person, the words you speak leave that person in a better state than when you first engaged them, right? Well, today we're talking about thoughts, and you can't do that with thoughts. So we got to think about thoughts a little differently. So what does it mean to practice nonviolence with your thoughts? Well, you might have gathered after being with you for a year that my mind at times works in odd ways. And one of the oddities about my mind is that I think about thoughts too much. I really do. I am a philosopher by trade. That's all right. And so I tend to think a lot about thoughts. Have you ever thought about your thoughts? Not like thinking, I have thoughts, but like really thinking about your thoughts. Like, why do I have those thoughts? And where did that thought come from? And what the heck does that thought mean? It's even mine, and I don't quite get it. I mean, I can think about thoughts in a lot of different ways. So I have a curiosity, though, especially about thoughts. And I don't know, maybe some of you have had this curiosity. We all know we have thoughts, right? If I say to you, what are you thinking right now? Don't tell me, because it's probably commentary on the sermon. I don't want to hear it yet. But you're having some thought, probably piqued by the sermon. So you're having a thought about what you're hearing me say, probably, unless your mind is wandering, in which case you're not even hearing me ask the question, what are you thinking right now? And you're thinking something else. So we all know we have thoughts. And we can all go inside and we can say, this is the thought I'm having in the moment. But have you ever thought about where thoughts originate? I've actually spent a fair amount of my time wondering where the heck thoughts come from. Because I have spent a lot of my life going inside of my own self, paying attention to my thoughts, especially in my spiritual practice of meditation. And I noticed about 10 years ago that I've never seen a thought originate. I've never seen a thought arise within me. So I decided about 10 years ago when I was on pilgrimage that I was going to figure out where thoughts come from. And so when I go on pilgrimage to India, I'm very lucky. I get Abhishektananda's hut, which will have great meaning to you all, right? But Abhishektananda's hut, he was one of the leaders of the ashram for a long time. And he had this hut that was a little palatial by, ashram standards. And it had this great front porch. And you could sit on the front porch and you could look out over the elephant grass and you could watch the ashram workers harvesting the elephant grass and going to feed the cows. And just beyond the elephant grass, There was a sacred Kaveri River, and over here to the right, about 50 yards, there was this crematorium space where they would burn bodies and do the sacred mantras when somebody died. And these were exquisite sights to take in. And I used to sit on that porch and meditate a lot. So I'd take my meditation cushion and I'd sit on the porch and I'd meditate. And I decided a few pilgrimages ago, I'm going to refine my observing capability so well that not only am I going to watch my thoughts, I'm going to watch them arise. In order to do that, you have to get to a place between thoughts. Because thoughts come and go, right? I have this thought, it moves on, and the next thing you know, there's another thought and it moves on, then there's another thought and it moves on, right? We all know thoughts just come and go. And if you do any self-observation about your thinking, you've seen this happen in your own mind, and it happens all the time. But if you want to watch the thought originate, you've got to find some spaciousness between where this thought ends and before this one gets on the radar. So there's an empty, thoughtless spaciousness in your thinking that if you can refine your attention enough and look for that spot, you can have very, very brief moments of genuine mental emptiness. And those moments are exquisite, but they're so short, and it's hard to get to them because thoughts just keep moving. So I really focused on the empty space between thoughts, and I was able to get into that space and hold my awareness there and just wait for the next thought. And I noticed two things. One was, when I could get into that space and just watch for the arising of the next thought, that moment of empty mind expanded. And that expansion led to a stillness and an equanimity that was just exquisite. So the first thing I learned is that if I watch for the arising of thoughts, instead of thoughts that pass and just learn to let them go, as the teaching is, just watch your thoughts and let them go, and then watch the next thought and let it go. I'm like, no, I'm going to look for the arising of thoughts. I could get into this space, and it would greatly deepen my spiritual practice. So that was a real boon in looking for the origination of thoughts. But I utterly failed to see a thought arise. I could get into that space and I could expand it with refined attention on that emptiness. But at some point, I'd realize I'm no longer empty. There's a thought staring me in the face. And I didn't see where it came from. So no matter how refined my awareness was on that empty space, I still never managed to see a thought arise, and it would just be there. That was frustrating. I've stared at my navel a lot, and I still don't know where thoughts originate. So that was the other thing I learned. Thoughts are just going to be there. I was so frustrated by this that I decided to dip into some neurological material. I wanted to study what neurologists say about thoughts and the activity of the mind. Like, they must know where thoughts come from, right? The neurologists will know. If I can't catch one arising, they're scientists. They'll know. So I dug into the material only to find out none of the neurologists I studied could tell me how thoughts originate. And as far as I know, nobody knows. Thoughts just are. Kind of like Winnie the Pooh. Have you heard the phrase, Pooh just is? Thoughts just are. So, we have to deal with them. And the Jains say it's important that you deal with your thoughts according to the principle of Ahimsa. Well, that's kind of hard. If thoughts are just going to arise without my intention, they're going to be what they're going to be. And let's have an honest moment. Those of you who have watched your thoughts, they ain't always nonviolent. They can have some pretty scoundrelly tendencies to them. So thoughts, of all the things the Jains want us to pay attention to with the Ahimsa, deeds, words, and thoughts, thoughts to me are the hardest to deal with, which is why I chose to talk about them last. So thoughts just are, they're going to happen. Well, they're very important because, as I mentioned both in the last 2 weeks, part of this teaching around Ahimsa with deeds and words and thoughts is that there's a causal train that connects these three things. Usually it's thought gives rise to word, gives rise to deed. And this is a causal train, and the Jains tell you it's important that you pay attention to all three aspects of this causal train because the tendency toward violent doing, speaking, or thinking can happen at any point on this causal train. But it usually begins with thoughts. So I've actually done this sermon like 7 or 8 years ago. I did this sermon on nonviolence in my previous congregation. And several people came up to me. We're such logicians and rationalists. Well, you know, I don't buy this whole argument of the causal train. Thoughts give rise to words, give rise to deeds. Sometimes I have thoughts and they don't give rise to words. I just don't say them. And they don't give rise to deeds because I'm able not to act on my thoughts. And so we always have the skeptical scoundrels among us who want to challenge this, right? And so people have said to me in the past, so if I'm not going to speak my harmful thoughts and I'm not going to act on my harmful thoughts, what difference does it make if I have some harmful thoughts? Right? If I just keep my scoundrelness to myself, what's the harm? Like, does that make sense? Some of you must be saying, I like that line of argument. I'm going to stick with it. I'm going to let my thoughts be my thoughts. And I'm here to tell you it's very important not to do that, especially if you want to practice Ahimsa. So I'm going to suggest that that causal train operates the vast, vast majority of time, even if not always. Usually your thoughts are going to find expression in words or expression in deeds. Okay? But let's just imagine for a moment that the reason we don't notice it is because we're complicit in the causal train. Like, there's a certain self-satisfaction and catharsis that takes place if we just let that causal train play out. Don't ask me to work on my thinking and my speaking and my deeds, because the way I show up in the world makes a lot of sense to me. And so we're kind of complicit in this causal train. I mean, the reason I had the thought is because you, madam, are a scoundrel. And the thought I'm having is because of how you are in the world. And in fact, the fact that I'm telling you what a scoundrel you are, thank God someone's here to let you know that. And we get a certain self-satisfaction out of that. We get a certain personal catharsis out of expressing our thoughts, our words, and our deeds. And we can even feel self-righteous about them, even when they might be harmful, because the scoundrel deserved it, right? Let's imagine, though, that this causal train isn't true. Let's imagine that the Jains are wrong. The connection between thoughts, words, and deeds isn't that strong. And if so, does the occasional harmful thought I have really matter? Well, I think it does. If you think back to last week when I talked about words, for those of you who were here, I said when somebody speaks words to us, we have a neurological response to those words, which has a physiological effect on us, which is why it's important to speak good words, kind words to others, so that the physiological effect they have is a positive one when we speak to them. When you speak to yourself, you are still having those physiological effects. Have you ever caught yourself in a negative loop in your thinking? Have you noticed what that does to your emotional state? Yeah, when you have a negative thinking loop, you get yourself depressed, or you get yourself angry, or you get yourself scared, and you are having physiological reactions to your own thinking. So even harmful thoughts, whether they're about yourself or others, create these neurological responses that still have a physiological effect on us. We can release all sorts of detrimental hormones in our bodies just because of the way we're thinking. And this is, when I say to people from time to time, how's it going living in your skin, by the way? Right? That's not an idle question. That's an honest question from me. I often want to know, how's it going living in your skin? Well, the nature of your thoughts are a big part of the answer to that question. If living in your skin ain't going well, look at your thoughts. They matter. They really matter. So, one of the great Jain teachers, Mahavira, who lived 3,000 years ago, said this: "We corrupt ourselves as soon as we intend to corrupt others. We kill ourselves as soon as we intend to kill others." In other words, just the thought we have that is harmful, just the thought about another, has the same detrimental effect on us as we would intend toward the other. Jesus said, "I say unto you that everyone that looks upon a woman and lusts after her has already committed adultery within his heart." That's steep. You don't hear preachers preach about that often, because that's very steep. Take that in its general terms. The thoughts you have, you commit because of the effect they have on you. So the point is, our inner dialogue, whether it's about other or self, can be very harmful to self. And so this raises the question, if thoughts just are, if the causal train of thought, word, and deed gives rise to violence, or even if that's not true, and the thoughts we have simply do harm to us, how do we meet this Jain demand to not commit harm in our thinking, to take Ahimsa even to the point of our thinking? How do we meet that demand? Because it's very important. It's at least as important as not doing harm with our actions or not doing harm with our words. How you generate your own internal experience is just as important as doing or not doing harm to others. And so, I didn't have an answer to that question. I had to think quite a while when I encountered Jainism, and it's like, even my thinking, I have to apply the principle of Ahimsa to my thinking. Like I said, I know my thinking pretty well, and I'm one of the best scoundrels among us. I have my moments, and I don't know if I can do it. So I was looking for some advice from some Jains, like, how do you manage your thinking at that level successfully? And I ran across a doctor whose name is Sohan Lal Jain Gandhi. Sohan Lal Jain Gandhi. If Jain Gandhi doesn't give somebody enough authority in a sermon like this, nothing does, right? And she wrote in the Jain Avenue magazine, "The idea of killing or doing harm to others or conspiring against others first originates in the human mind. The main reason for this inclination in the human mind is the four major human passions: attachment, hatred, pride, and deceit." That's what she says. So this is beginning to sound maybe a little bit familiar, right? In my vernacular, what she's saying is, it's our instinctual life, our emotional, habitual, negative tendencies that give rise to those thoughts. And if she's right about that, she's handed us a real gift on how to manage these thoughts. Mahavira again said, injurious activities inspired by self-interest is what leads to evil and darkness. Again, I think the thoughts are generated out of instinct. So now we're back to one of the first messages I brought to you a year ago. The struggle with our instinctual nature as the ultimate impediment to living from our best selves. So maybe we could tweak the Jain ethic and say that it's important not to commit violence or do harm in instinct, thought, word, or deed. Because if you don't deal with your instincts, I don't think you're going to be able to deal with your thoughts and your words and your deeds very successfully. Instincts are the core motivator by which and through which we act in the world. And I think she's really on to something there. All right, so in 3 minutes, I'm going to tell you how to deal with your instincts. Because the Jains answered this. The Jains actually answered this. So when I read this from her, I thought again about Mahavira. Mahavira says, Ahimsa, the ability to move through the world without doing harm. Ahimsa sprouts from a person's inner awakening. In other words, says Mahavira, there is a truth about the world to which we remain ignorant. But if we can come to the realization of what that truth is, we awaken to that truth. And in awakening to that truth, we can act in the world from the principle of Ahimsa. So what is that truth? And we're basically going to end with this. You have to go back a couple of weeks, and if you missed it, watch the first 10 minutes of that sermon where I introduced this, and I talked about the Jain notion of karma and how beings are trying to work their way to liberation in life, which is why we don't interfere. Along those lines, Mahavira says this, Ahimsa sprouts from a person's inner awakening. What is that? Here's what he's saying. I'm going to say this slow, and I'm going to say it twice because I know some of you like to take notes, and it's a little long. Only when we awaken to the spiritual truth that the universe is a great unified cosmic mechanism, all things are connected. Only when we awaken to the spiritual truth that humans and every other living being are integral to this mechanism. Every living being is so connected. We realize that we must conduct ourselves in harmony with this cosmic mechanism. Because each being is part of a spiritual tapestry that affects every other being's path to liberation. In other words, we are each so integrally connected to the totality of all that is, which includes every conscious being on the planet, that every action we take affects the whole. Only when we realize this will we understand the importance of the principle of nonviolence. That's what Mahavira is saying. Ahimsa sprouts from a person's inner awakening. Only when we awaken to the spiritual truth that the universe is a great unified cosmic mechanism. Only when we awaken to the spiritual truth that humans and every other living being are integral to this mechanism. Only when we awaken to the truth that we must conduct ourselves in harmony with this mechanism. Only then does the fact of each being being integral to this spiritual tapestry bring us to the realization that we must act from Ahimsa. Until then, our ignorance will continue to lead to violence and harm in our thinking, in our words, in our deeds, and we will continue to disrupt other beings as they try to pursue their own liberation from the bondage of karma. But if you're a good materialist, you'll be interrupting other beings' attempts to live their own life path according to their consciousness. So Ahimsa is all pervasive, and it is the ultimate spiritual principle according to the Jains, and I think they're probably right. Ahimsa paramo dharma. Nonviolence is the great religion. And when you really let yourself absorb the content of the last 3 sermons, you realize that in thought, in word, in deed, we unconsciously go about harming other beings as we move through life. And if we can awaken to the truth of our situation as Mahavira defines it, we will then be motivated to operate from the principle of Ahimsa, to do no harm. It's a very demanding and a very steep path, but I would submit to you that of all the world religions that we can study, this principle of Ahimsa that comes from the ancient tradition of Jainism is in lockstep with what Unitarian Universalists profess to be. Does the principle of Ahimsa remind you of any of our 7 principles? We now have 8 here at First U, but of any of our 7 principles? Does anything I say make you go, ah, that resonates with this of our principles? Shout it out. The interdependent web of existence of which we are a part. So, we'll end our series on Ahimsa there with one simple quote. And is Chloe still with us? She split. Would you extinguish the chalice for us? The quote is very simple. It actually comes from Proverbs. One of the things I love to do is look at all the different world religions and the wisdoms they contain and see where they resonate with each other. And I love the fact that I can pull out of Proverbs, of all places, to resonate with a teaching from Jainism. But Proverbs 23 says, "As one thinks, so one is." Blessed be. I'll see you in the receiving line and/or coffee hour.